Hi everyone. Where I'm going to actually make a video, a break from the how municipal government works. I'm hoping to put up maybe one or two videos a week. One of them in my series on how municipal government works or how Canadian government works when municipal is done, and one more of a commentary and explanation of something in current events. And this week has been full of really interesting current events to do maybe a commentary and explanation on. But the one I chose was this week was actually the ruling by the Ontario Superior Court about the men who have sex with men blood donation. And I've heard some real crap over this ruling over the last few days, so I wanted to maybe do some explanation of it. And before I begin, I will give my normal spiel. I'm not a lawyer, I'm a political scientist. I will be looking at this from a political science point of view, not a legal standpoint. Having said that, I do have experience in the interpretation of the Charter and do have competency in that area, so I will be using that competency. So there's really two issues which I want to touch on here constitutionally, because after all, at the end of the day, this was a constitutional case. Let me begin by prefixing my personal belief in this case is that we should be looking at maybe more reasonable uses of the law of policy than banning anyone who has had sex with another man since 1977. Having said that, there's two issues I wanted to touch on, and two issues that's been getting a lot of very bad attention lately. The first is the government entity question, and I was watching Canada AM this morning, and I wanted to throw something at the television when Seamus O'Regan said, "Well, isn't everyone subject to the Charter?" Well, no. The answer, well, yes and no. So let me go back and look at what the Charter is and what the Charter actually says. The Charter is a matter of government policy, part of the Constitution Act 1982. Part 1, in fact, of the Constitution Act 1982, and probably the most known part of the Constitution Act 1982. Very few people actually know about the ending formula. People always know about the Charter. And the Charter protects basic rights of the individual. Now, in this case, the question is, who does it protect it from? Well, the assumption is that the basic rights of the individual can only be taken away by the state or a state actor. So, for example, the right for freedom of religion can only be forcibly removed by the state. Now, yes, there are certain times when a non-state actor can interfere with your right for religion, but or any other rights, but the only body that can actually force you into action or inaction is the state. So that's the first part. And the second part is that not everything that appears to be a state actor is a state actor. Now, everyone, when they go to a hospital or to a university, think, oh, I'm going to a government-run university or government-run hospital. That's not the case under the Charter. Under the Charter, only applies to the apparatus of government controlled by the government. So in the case of a university or hospital, they have an independent board of governors. Yes, they do a public policy function, but the government does not control their action. Unlike ironically, a college is the opposite. A college in Canada is ran by the government, since the government can't control their function. So this brings it back to this case. Well, surely the Canadian Blood Services is a government actor, people think. Well, no, it's actually not. The Canadian Blood Services is a corporation under the Canadian Corporations Act. The shareholders is the Minister of Health of the provinces and territories, and not the federal government is not part of it. It is incorporated under the Canadian Corporations Act, not under special legislation, so it is not given any special powers of in the public policy realm. What the court ruled is that not only is it not given any powers in the public policy realm, but it is not given any powers to implement public policy. What it really does is it supplies blood to the provinces and territories except Quebec. But it does not perform a public policy function, therefore it is not a government actor, the court ruled. Do I think the court was right? I have the sneaking suspicion you're going to see some disagreement when you get to the Supreme Court on this, but that's neither here or there. That's what the court ruled. The second thing is the equality before and under the law issue. The equality before and under the law issue was one that was brought forward that it discriminates based on sexual orientation. This was ruled that it discriminates on behavior, not necessarily sexual orientation. Therefore, it discriminates based on something that you do. So the court ruled that there wasn't a case there. Now, I have about 2 minutes left in this video, so I want to give you what I think is probably going to happen to this. I think you're probably going to see a reversal of this policy, and you're probably going to see major policy changes in this area. What policies are going to come out of it, I'm not too awfully sure. My guess is that you're going to move to a more risk-based ban, not necessarily a general ban since 1977, but that's yet to be seen, and I'm not quite sure how that would look like. But my assumption is you're going to see Canadian Blood Services change its internal policies, but I don't necessarily believe that you're going to see the Supreme Court reverse any real element of this decision. I generally just think you may see a division of the Supreme Court whether or not Canadian Blood Services is a government actor. I think I'm not even sure you're going to see that, because I think it's pretty clear based on the Memorandum of Understanding which created the Canadian Blood Services and the Canadian Corporations Act and the Rural Health Canada in the blood services supply, that it really isn't a government actor. Having said that, and I want to give the remaining time into my video to make sure this is absolutely positively clear, I in no way actually condone homophobia, and saying that these elements of the decision is correct in law is not saying they're right. I do believe that this policy needs to change, but I agree with the court that this policy must change through the normal course of affairs, and it is an internal matter for this entity to decide upon, and is not a public entity under the charter that the courts can just go and change it. So, in conclusion, that's what the court ruled. I think you're going to see some changes at Canadian Blood Services, and I think you're going to see a lot more changes that make sense. I've posted the link to the decision. It's fairly long. It's 160 some pages long in the description box. I encourage you to read it, and I encourage you to get further education on who the charter applies to. I'll be back with my normal videos next week. Until then, I hope everyone have a wonderful weekend.